Well, if you've never seen it, we've all heard of Beauty and the Beast. The story of a beautiful young lady who, once she realized he was beautiful inside, fell in love with a man who looked like a beast. It's a story that teaches us to look beneath the skin, to look into a man's heart before passing judgment on him. That people are not always what they at first seem to be. Well, this morning we've got a beauty and beast story in the book of Revelation. Only here it's the beauty who's not what she appears to be. We're here reminded that sometimes beauty is only skin deep, and that beneath an attractive and beautifully adorned exterior might lie a heart full of abominations and immoralities. So let's take a look at this beauty and beast this morning, beginning with the beauty. We're going to be covering 2 chapters in Revelation this morning because the story covers those both chapters, beginning in the 17th chapter. And one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke to me, saying, "Come here, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. And upon her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly. In the 16th chapter of Revelation, we saw bowls of God's wrath poured out on those who refused to heed the trumpets of warning, poured out upon unrepentant humanity. And at the 7th bowl, which pictured the final judgment, we saw Babylon the Great split into 3 parts, and we're told that Babylon was given the cup of the wine of God's fierce wrath. In the 17th chapter, we see one of the 7 angels who had the bowls come to John and tell him he's about to see the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. Now, the image of a harlot is new in Revelation, but we've already met her. In fact, she's Babylon. We know that because her name was on her forehead, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. The great harlot is Babylon, pictured as a harlot, because a harlot graphically portrays her character. But ancient Babylon, the seat of the Babylonian Empire that ruled the world and destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, was long gone. So who is being pictured here? Most likely, another city. A city that had taken Babylon's place on the world stage. Another world power that had become a center of seduction. Another place of luxury and idolatry and immorality. And in John's day, that was the city of Rome. Whenever John spoke of Babylon, his hearers thought immediately of Rome. It was Rome that had conquered or seduced the kings of the earth. Rome had led them into both physical and spiritual immorality. The excesses of Rome's immorality are legendary. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, was the what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas of the 1st century. But even worse than her immorality was her spiritual harlotry. She either forced or seduced the world into making her their God. At the time of John's writing, people throughout the world were burning incense on altars of the state and declaring Caesar is Lord. Rome had become a great harlot, seducing God's beloved into abandoning their commitment to and dependence upon their God. And it was as such that John saw her when he was transported in the Spirit into the wilderness. There he saw her sitting on a scarlet beast, a beast with 7 heads, emblazoned with blasphemous names and 10 horns. We've seen this beast before. It's the beast that came up out of the sea. And we're going to take another look at this beast in a moment. So for now, let's just focus our attention on the woman. The first thing we notice is that she's dressed in purple and scarlet, the most luxurious of fabrics in the ancient world, and is adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She's a picture of beauty, of everything attractive and alluring. In her hand is a golden cup, a cup that holds the promise of something wonderful inside, but a cup that is instead full of abominations and the unclean things of her immorality. Then John notices her headband, a headband like those worn by harlots in the ancient world that advertised their profession and their name. This harlot's name, he said, was a mystery. But then he told us her name, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. A mystery in the Bible is something that is unknown until God reveals it. And here he revealed that Babylon was the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And while beautiful to behold, Babylon was the source of great immorality and abominations against God. The most devastating abomination was her desire to destroy the church, to drink the blood of the saints, the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. She not only wanted to lead the world astray, but to devour those who might resist her seduction. And when John saw her, he wondered greatly. And so do we. Who might this harlot be in our day? Ancient Babylon and imperial Rome are both gone. But we still have centers of seduction today, places of luxury and glamour and vice. Such places can obviously be thought of as our Babylon, or at least one of her offspring. Every place where men are seduced into making riches or pleasure their God can be viewed as Babylon. Every center of seduction that would draw men away from God and lead them into immorality can be viewed as a great harlot. In fact, anything that would hold out a golden cup of promise, anything that looks good on the outside but is filled with abominations on the inside, is a deceptive beauty we find in Revelation. So let's go on now to the beast upon which she rides. And the angel said to me, "Why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and to go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast, that he was and is not and will come. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. And the beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. And the 10 horns, which you saw, are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. As we've already noted, we've seen this beast before. It's the beast from the sea that arose as an ally of Satan on earth. The beast of governments that forget their intended role as ministers of God and attempt to replace him. In the 13th chapter, we were told the beast had been slain but had come back to life. And here we're told he was and is not and will come. This would have probably been viewed by Christians of John's day as a reference to the Nero redivivis myth. The belief that Nero, the first emperor to officially persecute Christians, would come back to life and continue the persecutions. Many believe that Domitian, the emperor who banished John to Patmos and revived the persecution of Christians, fulfilled that myth. And it's likely when the angel said the beast was and is not and will come, reflected that myth. But this also may be simply a description of the nature of the beast, that he appears, disappears, and reappears again. And governments that take the place of God, at least in the minds of people, do rise and fall all the time. And every time a new one rises to power, masses follow after it, seduced by the promises made and the power it yields. We're seeing that play out in our nation even now in this election cycle. Well, the source of such power was revealed when the angel said the beast was about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. The power is satanic. And some believe this coming up out of the abyss and going to destruction indicates the beast, an unchristian, anti-Christian government, will be in power when Christ returns for the final conflict. And that may be true. But the primary message being conveyed to John's original readers was simply that the Roman Empire was a beast and that it was Rome. It was being made clear when the angel said the 7 heads of the beast were 7 mountains upon which the woman was seated. Rome was built on 7 hills. And even though the 7 mountains might also serve as an apocalyptic symbol of awesome might and strength, they would no doubt be viewed as a reference to the city of Rome. The seductive harlot sat on a powerful beast. The city of seduction was in league with the power of the empire, and together they functioned as a unit. Those who wouldn't yield to the seduction of the harlot were viciously attacked by the beast. Now, the statement that the 7 heads were also 7 kings, 5 who had fallen, 1 who is currently reigning, and 1 who was yet to come, has been the object of much speculation. Some try to identify individual emperors here, and others view this as a sequence of kingdoms rather than specific kings. But either way, however you try to identify them, there are some problems historically. And no one should state with absolute assurance that he's got it figured out. Perhaps the best thing to do with this is keep it general and let it simply be a statement to the effect that various kingdoms, kings, and rulers will align themselves with the dragon until Christ returns. There is indeed a corrupting nature to the power in the hands of men. And time and again, we're going to see governments align themselves against the kingdom of God. The Lamb of God, however, will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him, the called and chosen and faithful, will share in his victory. Likewise, the peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues that come under the influence of the harlot will share her fate, a fate partially executed by the beast himself. For once the beast has the masses in his clutches, he no longer needs a deception of the harlot. He will strip away her facade of beauty, and the things that draw men away from God will be exposed for what they really are. Yes, God can even use a beast to accomplish his purposes. But the destruction of the beauty begun by the beast will be finished by God himself. Chapter 18. And after these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illumined with his glory. And he cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. And she had become a dwelling place of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. And all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality. And the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her. And the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality." And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins, and that you may not receive of her plagues. For her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she has paid, and give back to her double according to her deeds. In the cup which she has mix twice as much for her. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am not a widow, and will never see mourning. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For the Lord God, who judges her, is strong." As John is contemplating the beauty and the beast, another angel, a glorious angel, descended from heaven in his vision. And the angel cried out with a loud voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." He heard the judgment as if it had already taken place, and the great city of luxury and splendor had become the dwelling place of demons and vultures. Babylon had fallen because she had corrupted the nations and kings and merchants of the earth. She had led them astray with promises of riches and pleasure, and had rewarded them as promised. But she had failed to reveal the consequences of such. At that point, another voice from heaven was heard saying, "Come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins, and that you may not receive of her plagues." God was telling his people to cut themselves off from the city of earthly delights, to avoid the sensual pleasures of immorality, if they wanted to avoid the plagues of judgment that were coming upon the harlot. She thought she could get away with it, that she could do whatever she wanted and even lead others to share in her sins without fear of reprisal, but God had not overlooked her sins. He just let them pile up until the time was right to pronounce judgment on her. And that time had come at least in the vision. God was about to give her her due. And to the same degree that she had glorified herself and lived sensuously, to that degree she would be given torment and mourning. She had arrogantly declared herself to be a queen above the sorrows of life in the hand of God, but was about to discover that the God who sits in judgment is a strong God indeed. In one day, she would be hit with plagues, pestilence, mourning, famine, and fire. In one fell swoop of the mighty hand of God, she would be destroyed. This was to be the judgment of Rome. And this is the judgment of every center of sensual delights and immorality. Babylon was doomed, even while reveling in glory and seducing others into the pleasures of her sin. And those she seduced will share in her destruction and will mourn. And the kings of the earth, who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her, will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment, saying, "Woe, woe, the great city, Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come." And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and every article made from very costly wood and bronze and iron and marble and cinnamon and spice and incense and perfume and frankincense and wine and olive oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep and cargoes of horses and chariots and slaves and human lives. And the fruit you long for has gone from you. And all things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. The merchants of these things, who became rich from her, will stand at a distance because of the fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, "Woe, woe, the great city, she who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour such great wealth has been laid waste." And every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor, and as many as make their living by the sea, stood at a distance and were crying out as they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, "What city is like the great city?" And they threw dust on their heads and were crying out, weeping and mourning, saying, "Woe, woe, the great city, in which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she has been laid waste." Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. Who will mourn Babylon's destruction? Those who have shared in her immorality and who have profited from her vices. Those who have sold out to her seduction. Those who thought they could live for the pleasures of today with no thought about the consequences tomorrow. When they see her judgment, they will weep and mourn. Everything they thought was of value becomes worthless, and they are left with nothing but despair. What a picture this is of life built around things. A life that has been deceived by the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the vainglory of life. They couldn't believe it. In just 1 hour, such great wealth had been laid waste. Their hope was gone. Their future was in the rubble of Rome. But not everyone mourned the passing of Babylon. The hosts of heaven, the saints, the apostles, the prophets, they all rejoiced. The truthfulness of God's word had been vindicated. Though it may seem for a time that sin has its rewards, Judgment is sure, and those who stand fast in the face of the harlots of seduction and the fury of the beast will one day rejoice while the rest of the world throws dust on its head and cries and weeps and mourns inconsolably. Babylon's end is sure. Her beauty won't last forever. One day, she will be gone. And a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, "Thus will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will not be found any longer. And the sound of harpists and musicians and flute players and trumpeters will not be heard in you any longer. And no craftsman of any craft will be found in you any longer. And the sound of a mill will not be heard in you any longer. And the light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride will not be heard in you any longer. For the merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on the earth." To demonstrate the end of Babylon, a strong angel took up a stone, the size of a great millstone, and threw it into the sea. And as the waters closed in around it, the harlot disappeared. She was gone. The life she fostered was over. And even the good things that coexisted with her were gone. The sound of her music could no longer be heard. Her craftsmen and artisans were no longer working. The food she ate was no longer being produced. Darkness prevailed, and the celebrations of this life were over. Everything that is in any way connected with Babylon will one day be gone. Even the good things. So we must not build our lives on the things of this world, even the good things, for in one day they will be done away with. This entire world, as we know it, will one day be gone, judged for the way it responded to the prophets God sent and for the way it treated his people. Our only hope is to be not of this world and to refuse to participate in her sins. To be cleansed from whatever sins into which we may have been seduced, and to build our lives on the things that will remain after Babylon is gone. And thanks be to God, this we can do because of Jesus. If Babylon and her wealth were laid waste this hour, and everything this world holds dear disappeared, how would you respond? Would you cry and weep and mourn? Or would you rejoice because something better is coming? Let's even look at this through a slightly less apocalyptic lens. If the stock market was to crash, you were to lose everything you have, and our country was put into subjection to her creditors, would you lose all hope? If you've been charmed by the world's delights, and you've lost sight of the things that are higher and nobler, you would. It's my prayer that none of us will ever allow the material things with which God has so richly blessed us to be used by Satan to blind us to that which is of infinitely more value. That we'll never be seduced into thinking our life consists in the abundance of the things we possess.